here. So the first training in our training series is all about our visual merchandising filters. So hopefully you guys have completed that module in AEO Academy, so it won't be the first time you're hearing about these filters, but essentially the visual merchandising filters are the lens through which we look at making decisions, particularly merchandising decisions in our stores. So rather than it just feeling like, you know, oh, I like this or this looks pretty, it gives us a foundation for making decisions, and it kind of puts us all on the same track towards hopefully making the same decision, if that makes sense. So we always want to back up any decisions we've made or changes or adjustments by speaking to the visual merchandising filters and how those influenced our decision. We also will start out with a little bit of review of ARI and a little bit of offline storytelling. So if you were able to complete those labs on AEO Academy, there will just be a little nice review for you. If you weren't, no worries. We are facilitating the offline storytelling later this week as a learning lab. And then, of course, you can go into AEO Academy at any time to reference the ARI storytelling module. But we were hoping most people could complete that before today. All right, so I am going to share my screen and get on the right guy here. All right, so I've got, can you guys see my screen? I can see Fayette on my, okay, cool. I got a nod. Awesome. Okay, we already did this. So our objectives today are, you know, first of all, to review storytelling in ARI and offline, along with the visual merchandising filters, and really do a deep dive into those. We're also going to understand and optimize ARI and offline brand best stat categories and how we can really maximize those and make the most of them in our spaces. We also want to work on building a merchant mindset to enable quality decision-making in our stores. So how are you kind of being a business owner in your four walls? Then we want to leverage our visual tools to maximize our business in a brand right way. So always, you know, keeping with the ARI and offline brand direction, but really maximizing what we own in our store. Okay, so as far as our storytelling review goes, if you have, you know, completed this training, you'll remember that there are, you know, some core elements of storytelling. So for ARI, the first one is shop concept. So this is just that idea that we're setting up the store through curated shops, and these can be based around a particular category. Like this one we see on the screen is all around offline, so it's all athleisure. So that would be the category we're standing for here. At other times, the shop may be more of like a vibe or a collection. So if I think about what's set right now in ARI, room 1 is, you know, it's a lot of swim, but it's not just swim. And it has a very particular feel to the room with this like blue and green under the sea color story. But there are elements of other categories there. So shops can show up in either of those two ways, as concentrated category or more of a theme. And we just see those throughout the store where they're highlighted on our overview in the floor set. So we try to protect wall to table adjacencies here to keep the whole shop together. And the shops are grouped throughout the store to, you know, touch different parts of our guest life or maybe reach different members of the audience, depending on what the shop is all about. And then for offline, this just looks a little different. So instead of really looking at shops, we're more so concerned with collections. So this would really be the fabrication collection. So these are our big 6 fabrications, the OG, the Hugger Goals, Real Me Extra, and Warm Up. Of course, these are usually grounded in leggings, but there are all other components of the collection, like the sports bra. Maybe sometimes we have like a fun top or a bike short that's added in, but really making sure to keep these collections separated throughout the store. And that's really what you're going to see highlighted in the boxes on your overview for offline. So those would be the 2 first pillars for ARI or offline storytelling. And then for both brands, we really look to color story to help tell stories throughout the store. So we know that we're generally in ARI see a strong warm to cool color story. It just really makes presentations pleasing to the eye. It like makes your brain feel good when we see all of these colors lined up in the right order. And just little reminders here about where basics might fit in. So nudes and creams usually live with warms, grays and blacks usually live with cool, white, and sometimes gray is a nice little bridge color between the two. So color story is very important to storytelling. And then another key element of storytelling that you'll remember from your training is balance and symmetry. So really offering this mix of categories and patterns and textures, print versus solid, to really create an interesting presentation. We also see symmetry of hardware setup or in a table, symmetry of prop placement. And then we usually have some kind of key idea in the presentation that kind of centers you, gives your eyes a break between a lot of like smaller items. So here we're just seeing these spaced out graphic tees. Sometimes it's a large piece of marketing. Other times it's a product display. So it just kind of grounds us and gives, you know, our eyes a break rather than it being these sports bras all the way across the wall, right? That might be a little overwhelming. So that's just a little nod back to balance and symmetry. Storytelling is kind of like the Aerie Merchandising 101. So we're really breezing through this. I hope you guys have time, if you have not, to go in and complete the full module. So the last piece of storytelling for both brands is going to be styling. So this definitely does show up differently in each brand because in Aerie, we rely heavily on bus forms for styling, and in offline, we do not have bus forms. So we really have to rely on the other elements. So we really look to styling to reinforce the brand strategy, to provide outfitting inspiration, you know, building that ADS, that UPT, highlighting current trends and key items, really showcasing those product details that may otherwise be missed just in the hanger or folded on a table. And then just to really elevate presentations, I always think about, like, you know, when you walk into Target, you can find some good stuff and there's usually a lot of product there, but is it very elevated? Does it feel very outfitted? Not as much as our stores, right? So we really want to offer that experience of an elevated, very styled shopping experience. So here on the screen, we see a few examples of this from the stylist picks in the fitting room. We see two examples of styling within presentations and wall presentations. So, you know, we're pulling the straps to show details. We're scrunching sleeves. We're adding accessories for outfitting. And then, of course, our bus forms here in the bottom right. You know, when we think about bus forms, we always say, are they just dressed or are they styled? Because just because they're wearing clothing does not mean that they are styled and really inspiring your guests. Okay, so that was like the quickest review of storytelling ever because I want to keep us on track. But again, you can find that training in AEO Academy for Aerie, and then we're facilitating the offline storytelling training this Thursday as part of this training series. Okay, so now we are shifting into the visual merchandising filters and really looking at them through an Aerie lens and how they would each show up for us as we are looking to, you know, maybe make adjustments or make decisions in our stores. So each and every merchandising decision we make in the store should be rooted in the visual merchandising filters, which are as follows. So we've got brand direction, we have our guests, we have architecture, and then we have inventory. And they are ordered in an order of importance. So I like to think of them this way. Now, they're all important and they all have to work together, but the one that is the most important to us is the brand direction. And that's really because the store out front for me doesn't say like Sarah's store, it says Aerie because we're all part of a large global brand. So we want to make sure that every store that we're walking into, whether it's in Miami or in Chicago, it's the same experience. Again, like you'll notice I really love Target because I'm going to talk about Target again. But whenever I travel, it's always like a nice calming experience for me to find a Target and go in there because I know where everything is. It feels familiar to me. And we really want to offer that same kind of experience for our guests, no matter what Aerie store or offline store they are going into. So that's why brand direction is so important to us. And then we're going to go into guests next because we really do want to react to what our guest in our particular area is really interested in and is buying. And this is where there may be a difference between that Miami store and that Chicago store, especially at certain times of the year where we really have to cater differently to the guest that's shopping with us in that area. And then we do want to look at architecture, which is going to be the build of our store, the layout. Do you have extra walls, extra tables? Are you very condensed? Are you a side-by-side location, or are you a standalone? All of these things go into the architecture filter. And then we've got inventory. So this is our last filter that we consider because we don't want to start making decisions with inventory. So I think about an example of, like, maybe you have about 500 pairs of red sweatpants in your stockroom for whatever reason. Some crazy thing happened and you have a ton. That doesn't mean that we just want to put red sweatpants everywhere all over the store, right? So it cannot be our driving decision maker, but it is very important because we can't merchandise what we don't have. So it's almost like all of these things depend on inventory because they all depend on what we own, but we shouldn't be looking through that inventory filter first. It's got to be kind of the root and the last thing that we're looking through. Okay, so now we're just going to dive into each brand filter, talk about the tools that we have that can assist us in understanding the filter and what we can use to direct us. So under brand direction, one of the first things we're looking at here is best at and win at categories. So that's one of your biggest considerations under brand direction. When you're making a decision, what do we really stand behind as a company? What are categories that we're always like, we want to win in this? If we want to maximize something, it's going to be these categories. So for Aerie, it's going to be bras and bralettes and leggings. And for offline, it's going to be leggings. So those are going to be your key categories that you always want to protect, that you always want to maximize in, a brand right way. So next are going to be a little bit more tangible tools. So the first one's more of just an idea of protecting these categories. Next, we do have tools that really help you understand the brand direction each season. So of course, floor set documents, huge in telling us what the story is for the season, what the brand is trying to communicate to the guests each season. And I would encourage you here to really check out all formats of floor set documents. So maybe you're an A3 market store, but there is a document for A3 small classic or A3 small modern. You can always check out those documents for inspiration because even if it's not the brand direction for your building, it's the brand direction for somebody, right? So that's a nice thing to lean on and to get inspiration from when you're needing to make decisions in your store where you may differ a little bit or have to do something a little different. Here we also have the kickoff or, no, I think it's still called the kickoff for offline. I was trying to call it the game plan, but it's not. So the kickoff before each floor set for each brand is really going to introduce you to, the top styles of the season, the big ideas of storytelling for the season, really get you grounded. And again, that message that we're trying to get across. We also have our, expected category percent to business there. So that can really give you a good gauge on like, am I tracking once I get, 2 or 3 weeks into the floor set, are my bralettes at 11% like they're supposed to be? Or is there something I need to look at differently? So that gives you a lot of great info about expectations for the season. Then here we have all the other elements that come out around floor set time. So window documents, floor set elements list, remove from presentation list, all of these things just inform you of what the brand is directing us to do in our stores. Okay, so next we have visual communication, and these are going to be a little bit more of the regular things you're getting through Zipline rather than right before each floor set. So we do have the Real Reel and the Game Plan, which is our weekly communication to stores that tells you everything from, like what product is replenishing or not replenishing, which can help you make adjustment decisions to, maybe new products we can release or small adjustments we want to make. So this is a great resource, comes out on Wednesdays every week in Zipline. So want to make sure that in all stores, we have a really good process of how we are downloading these, capturing these, and communicating them to the whole store team so that everyone knows what adjustments there are for the week, or how we're planning. And then similarly, we have Sunday Solves, which of course come out on Sunday officially, but a hot tip is that they actually post Friday afternoons because the folks at home office only work until they work until 5 p.m. on Friday. So they post them before they leave the office. So you actually will have access to those in the Zipline library if you look for them on Friday afternoon, which can help you through the weekend. And then you'll get a message about it on Sunday when they officially post. But you heard it here. You can see them earlier. We also have our floor set conference calls, which are hosted by the field visual team, which really just kind of breaks down certain things in the kickoff or in the floor set and highlight big changes and just really walk us through all together what the brand direction is for the season. And then you do have your training in AEO Academy. There's so much good stuff in there. You can go in and just search merchandising training or Aerie versus offline. You can find so many great things in there as you are doing your training over the next couple weeks. And then last but not least, very important one for us is the brand standards library. So this is located in the Zipline library. This is going to be where you find all of the evergreen instruction for how we merchandise at Aerie or offline. So this is going to be like, how do you fold leggings? How do you fold t-shirts? How do you hang a piece of marketing? Like all those things that can apply to lots of different floor sets and live all the time are going to be in the Zipline library. So that's actually really nicely organized. I would encourage you to get through as much of that as you can and really, you know, download some of them to your iPads in the store to make sure you have them as quick reference. But we do update them from time to time, so just be aware of that. Usually the latest date will be notated on the document to let you know if it's been updated. Okay, so here's a few little shots of the things we've talked about so far. So we've got the kickoff for each season, all the different floor set documents that we reference. Here's just little screen grabs of some important parts of the floor set document and the kickoff. So definitely our top 10 from the kickoff is very valuable to us to understand which items that we're really standing for this season. And I also think about from a merchandising point of view, if we think these are our top 10 items, we've probably bought pretty deep into these. So replenishment will be pretty good in these items. So when I'm needing to make adjustments or expand a presentation, I'm probably looking to these items, right? Because they'll be the ones that live the longest in the store. And then we have our shop overview, which we discussed during shop concepts. And then we also now in the floor set document have this little area of late arrivals, letting us know if certain things won't be here in time for the floor set. And that really helps us to plan efficiently and kind of lets us know when we'll see those arriving. So we know whether the adjustment we make needs to be like a really big one, or if it can just be like folding something differently until this other color arrives next week. Okay, and then here are two little screenshots of, on the left here, we see an example of the Real Reel. For offline, this would be the game plan. So just a little shot here to show you what this looks like. And then on the right here, the Sunday Solves. So I don't really think I talked too much about Sunday Solves a minute ago as far as content. So Sunday Solves are really sell-through adjustment suggestions. So generally what's included in Sunday Solves is not a necessarily directed adjustment by the brand. It's more sharing with you guys what other stores have done to make adjustments for sell-through or late arrivals or, you know, even sometimes architectural challenges in their stores to give you inspiration. So you totally can execute these things if you are having the same challenges. But like in this example on the right, this store had sold through in a bunch of shorts. So they had added some trays of bralettes here. If you own a ton of shorts and you don't need to make this change, you don't necessarily have to make this adjustment, right? It's just here to give you some inspiration. And it's also a great tool to show you, you know, how the brand thinks about adjustments. So you can see, okay, if at some point I am sold down in bottoms, maybe adding a tray of some kind of bralette is a good solve, right? It shows you what a good solve looks like, maybe for future reference, if that makes sense. Okay, so one last thing we're going to look at in brand direction is just seeing the filter in action. So how are we really using it? So here's our situation. We've gotten to floor set night and we're looking to build, and I realized that, wow, this whole presentation has a lot of undies in it, and I as a store have not received any of these new undies. So it really messes with my presentation because it's my whole upper, right? So all of these undies on forms. and it's a lot of shelves in this wall. So I'm missing a ton of what goes in this wall. So instead of like starting from scratch and trying to build a whole new presentation, by myself at 11 p.m. in the store, I just take a moment to flip through a few more pages and maybe a couple other floor set documents from other formats. And I see that, I'm a mainline store, I'm not a factory store, but it looks like the factory stores aren't receiving these fashion undies at all because they actually don't ever receive fashion undies. So there is another version of this wall that is already built for me. Already instruction is there for a different format where we're just kind of shifting a few things around and bringing one more product into this wall to really fill it in without the undies. So instead of having to get super creative and do a ton of work, I was just able to reference another format direction that came from the brand to set this wall. So much less work for me. It is a directed presentation by the brand, so we know we're on point with how we should be presenting in our stores. So this is a great example of utilizing another format for set direction. Okay, so question to kind of review something we've talked about. Why is brand direction the most important filter? And you can use the chat, you can take yourself off mute, whatever you choose. Anybody?
Feel cohesive as a brand.
Yes, cohesive, consistent.
There
These
it
are
is.
all keywords. Oh, in some chat.
Yeah.
Yes, your reference company. That's so right. Keep any adjustments cohesive with the brand. And I think for my offline friends on the call, this is even more important because there's a very small amount of offline stores right now, and we're really educating our guests on what the brand is. So even more in those stores, we really got to keep a consistent and cohesive message. So awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so now we're going to dive a little deeper into the guest filter and what this guy means and the tools you have here. So I think of the guest filter as being two parts. Think of it as being like some reporting, right? So cold hard facts, so things that are just numbers. So what is your customer buying the most, which we see on the top styles report. And then we also see this in merchandise category, but we can also use the merchandise category report to understand how our department sales are stacking up against the rest of the company. Are we tracking with those original goals for each category? Am I comping the same as the rest of the company? If I'm down in bralettes, but the company's up in bralettes, I may need to look at how I'm merchandising my bralettes differently in my store to get up to the company average. So that's the first part of the guest filter, is really that the reporting piece. And then the other part is much more subjective. So if you throw it back to middle school when you learned about subjective versus objective. So subjective is very much like kind of situational, opinion-based. It depends on who you're talking to. So guest preferences and insights in the store, that can really depend on like what time you work, who you're interacting with in the store. I think this can be very subjective. So we really have to pair it with our reporting to get a good overall view of our guests, right? Because my view of my guests working Saturday mornings is very different than another brand ambassador's view working on like Tuesday mornings, right? You're going to see a different guest at that time. So both of those guest interactions and understanding the guest preferences during those times, they're both important, but we have to put them together and then even then have to put them together with our reporting to really get the full picture of what our guests for our particular location is really all about. So if we look at this in action, this is a situation that happened, I think it was like 2 years ago now, maybe it was a year ago, in our offline shop. So set the scene. here is one of our pallet walls where we were housing our offline shop at the time, which was our athleisure collection. And what happened here was that our Real Me leggings, if any of you have worked any time in the store, you know the Real Me leggings are like the number one, right? So this was pre-flare, so it has changed a little since then. But at the time, our basic Real Me leggings were like our bread and butter. They were always in our top 5 top styles. And when we set this floor set, we noticed that they dropped out of the top styles. And you'll notice here that they are folded on this bottom shelf, kind of very close to the ground, right? Which is never usually an ideal placement for any kind of key item. So here's what happened in our store. So the Real Me leggings really fell out of the top styles for the first time in months. But our store comp sales in Real Me leggings were on par with the rest of the stores, right? So it wasn't just my store where I was seeing this drop in Real Me leggings. It was like all stores. So we really then had to look to, our observations in the store. So those guest preferences and insights. So we're trying to figure out like what's going on with these Real Me. So one thing, the store team, all the leaders were like, this is great. I never have to straighten these stacks. Real Me are so hard to fold and they just stay perfect all the time. So wonderful, which we know that that's not a good sign, right? Because that means something's not getting shopped. We love to hate the black legging table because it gets so crazy all the time, but that's because people are shopping it constantly. And that's when we know a presentation's working, when it's getting a little bit wrecked. So the other thing we were noticing is guests were constantly asking where the Real Me leggings were. So they had either come in looking for them or maybe saw them on a bus form or their friend told them about them. But then they were getting into our space and they couldn't find them. And they were asking all of the brand ambassadors where they were located. So we took those two things together and decided to take some action. So we decided to hang the Real Me leggings in the wall on that side hang and instead fold down some of the more fashion pieces on the shelves at the bottom. And we really wanted to take time to ensure all the basic colors of the Real Me leggings were represented on the sales floor and were being consistently replenished, because sometimes if it's all fashion, that's not what everyone's looking for. So we wanted to make sure that there was something for everyone. So what did this look like in the end? So here's what our corner of offline ended up looking like. So not a huge change, right? It's literally just flipping two things, folding something and hanging something else. But what happened from this move and, taking into account our guest filter, we had some great real life results. So the Real Me leggings were back up in the number 3 spot in this store the next week for their top styles. So just something as small as this, like recognizing a problem, using your resources and understanding why your guest is not shopping this, really can impact your results. And, why do we want Real Me in the top 3? Well, because they're one of the highest priced items in our store. So we want to make sure that we are making the dollars, right? So we want to have the right things in our top 10. If your whole top 10 is all like socks and undies, I mean, it's great that you're selling socks and undies, but they're all like $4 a piece, right? So we want to get those higher dollar items in those top spots to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. So thinking back to our original, the brand direction filter, like how did we protect the brand direction filter here, even when we were looking at the guest filter? What are some things you guys noticed? If we think back to, see if I can go back to the original direction. So absorb. And then we're going to what we did.
So the color story is still similar?
Yep. You're protecting those key storytelling elements, right? You still have the same color story. We still have like those great marketing pieces. I even would say like the structure of the wall is still the same, right? Like I didn't take away the face outs of the skirts, because the skirts are obviously something we're really excited about. They're faced out. And if you've worked in stores, these skirts like do really well for us too. So we didn't sacrifice another key item to bring this item up. It was more about you know, how do we just swap something out that maybe isn't doing quite as well? The windbreaker set that we folded down, very much a fashion item, not going to be super popular with everyone. So totally, we're still following as much of the brand direction as we can and just making a small tweak to impact our business. Cool, thank you. All right, let's see. Okay, so little question for you guys. How do you go about understanding your guest preferences? Like, where are you gathering that more subjective information, and how are you doing that in your store? Nobody knows?
Asking them questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Asking them questions.
Yes, asking questions, just interacting with your guests, right? So this is anytime you're on the sales floor. I mean, you don't even have to be the LOD, or you filling in a bra wall and someone's shopping bras and you're like, oh my gosh, like, which one do you like? Like, what works for you in the fitting room? So this is where, as you know, if you're a merch team leader or a merch lead, you may not spend quite as much time on the sales floor as maybe your selling team leaders or your store team leader. So while it is about conversing with your guests, I think it's also about working with other members of the leadership team and really having that collaboration where you get information from them that inform your merchandising decisions. Because, you know, you may think something looks really great, you love one certain item, and then your other leaders are like, oh my gosh, no, like everyone takes it in the fitting room and they don't like it, or it's not, you know, doing well. So really take time to, you know, talk to the other leaders in your building and get their insight as well. Yeah, spending time in the fitting room, that's really important as an LOD, totally. And then just spending time with reporting, yeah. Okay, cool. So now we're moving into architecture. We are halfway through our filters. So the architecture filter, like we mentioned earlier, is really about your particular store build. So is your store built, you know, like the lab store, or is it a little bit different? Are you a little bigger than most other stores? Are you smaller? You know, how is your store constructed? How many fixtures do you have? So all of these things can be found on what's called your STAR report. If you're ever wondering, like, all of the little minute details about your space and your physical store, there's a report that is accessible on your back computer in the stockroom under reporting on the ISP computer. That is called the STAR report, and it's really going to let you know what is your store format and product assortment, as well as any architectural details. So architecture really does encompass the build of the store, but then it also encompasses what product you carry, because we do have different, I guess I won't say levels, but different formats of stores. So we have A3 stores that carry a full assortment. Then we have A3 small stores that carry a slightly smaller assortment, maybe less color choices in certain things, or they don't carry certain collections because their space is just smaller and they wouldn't be able to fit all of those things. Your store design is also important here and is listed on your STAR report, whether you're a factory versus a mainline store. So all of those things go into architecture. Here we have what's called the mapping data worksheet, which will kind of help you understand your store versus the lab store that you'll see in the floor set documents, how it stacks up and how you may be different and what adjustments you may need to make every floor set. So we'll look at what that looks like in a minute. Under architecture, we also have, of course, mapping and the Mapped app, which are huge components of the architecture filter. So, you know, how do you take the lab store direction we see here on the left and translate it into a store that looks very different? How are we making the stories come alive in the same way and really making the floor set fit your space? And then we also have our fixture catalog and translation guide, which can help you understand all the fixtures that you own in your assortment. Those are available in the Zipline library if you ever want to go in and check out like all the market design fixtures and what they look like in use and what the understocking capabilities are. All of those are in our fixture props and fixture catalogs that are in the Zipline library. Okay, so let's look at a few things. So here we see a star report on the left side. So this is that report I was referencing on your back computer that will let you know all of the things about your store. So what your format is, what your assortment is, you know, how many wall bays you have, how many tables you should have, all those things are listed there. And then on the right side, this is where we see an example of the mapping data worksheet. So what this worksheet does is it tells you, okay, when we're mapping the lab store and taking the photos for all the floor set documents, here's the model quantity of all the things you'll see. So we have 4 nesting tables here, we have 3 undie bars, and you go through and say, okay, in my store, I only have 3 nesting tables, I only have 2 undie bars. So that really lets me know where I'm gonna have to make adjustments every time I set a floor set. So it's kind of like your little reference guide, right, for your store. It also has a space for you to fill in, if you have windows, what your window measurements are, so that each time you set a window, if the window's like, okay, if you're 54 inches across, you set this one. If you're 78 inches across, you set this one. You don't have to measure every time, right? You just keep this one list of this one time you measured, and keep this little resource in your floor set binder, and it'll be a great reference tool for you. And then we do also have mapping modules in AEO Academy. There's a mapping learning lab you guys will go through this week that is very tied to the architecture filter and helping you understand how to map effectively within your space, and a little bit around how to use the Mapped app, which is such a great resource. It has your particular store blueprint, and you can drag and drop floor set images to really make a plan for your space. Okay, so looking at architecture in action, we're just going to see an example of a store that may have to make a few adjustments based on how they're laid out. So on the left, we see the lab store laydown, and on the right, we see this particular store's floor layout. So it looks like this store is maybe much bigger than the lab store, but they have an added component of being a factory store, which means that they need a lot of room for clearance. And here on the right, we see these 2 bays that are given to clearance, right? So we're thinking about our shop concepts and how they're laying down for this particular floor set. Here is our clearance room. So in this factory store, this is where we house all of our clearance. So basically that room can't be used for any presentation. So now it almost feels like we're a little condensed, right, to the store on the left. Because the store on the left feels like they have a room 1, then you go into room 2, then to room 3. And now with all this area given to clearance, I only have these 2 rooms for my America's Factory outlet to set all of my new products for the floor set. So what we want to look at is my store is A3. So first I look at the A3 laydown. And here we're going to see how the shops are laying down in this space. So I've got my blue shop, whatever that was for the season, is living in all of room 1. My green shop is living in room 2, and then my third shop, which is probably bras, is living in room 3. So that's not going to work for me, right, because I only have 2 rooms. So I kind of have to figure out how to make this work for my space. So what I'm able to do is check out how A3 Small is laying down their store, because like we said, an A3 Small store generally has a lot less space. They have, a smaller assortment because they have less store space. So if you're needing to condense, A3 Small is a great one to look at. So here we're seeing that, okay, the pink, probably bra shop is still living where it is, but then my 2 shops up front are set kind of across from each other, right? So I can take that inspiration and then build that into my space. So I'm still, again, going back to that brand direction filter, making sure that I'm checking all my bases for any direction from the brand to guide me. And then I'm able to fit all of my shops and my clearance into my space. So then the only other thing I would have to make sure is that all of my tables are adjacent to the correct shop. So I may have to do a little maneuvering around of where things are placed to make sure that all the right tables are by the right walls. Okay, so that was a mapping example. Hopefully that made a little sense. So utilizing other formats and really protecting your shops within your space, even if you're condensed. And then another way that architecture can be used in action is kind of adjusting how we're setting fixtures on the floor to really fit our space. So in this example, we see this really long, lovely menu of leggings on this very long table. And in one particular store, this was just too long. It didn't fit in their store. It wasn't allowing for, ADA compliance and space around all the fixtures. So this store was able to convert it into, instead of two tables being beside each other long ways, they put them back to back. So they still had the same amount of surface area. They still maintained their wardrobers on either side. They were able to maintain the story, like the color story and all the styling elements and storytelling in just a different way that was able to fit their space a little better. So you can think of adjusting to your architecture in kind of those two ways, like how you're mapping your store and then maybe how you're placing certain fixtures. Okay, and then here's an example for offline. And this is in a side-by-side location where they have a breezeway. So this is something that you will have to consider if you are a side-by-side location, is making sure to account for the breezeway. If we had mapped this as instructed, this really long, lovely fixture was going to have its back facing to the breezeway, which wouldn't be a great experience coming over from the airy side of the store, right? So instead of setting it that way, this store chose to set these back to back to give a better entrance in from airy, to still house all the products. And they really chose to prioritize the color story that really played off the adjacent walls. So making sure to consider all of those elements of your architecture when you are mapping and placing fixtures. Okay, so this question for this section is just a little more like thought-provoking for you. No need to answer, but like think to yourself for a minute about like what's an architectural challenge you face when mapping your particular store? Like what are things you're always having to adjust for or you think are a little bit weird and different than what you've seen in the floor set documents? And just make yourself a few little notes to like dig into some of these tools and resources to try to, make the best of the architecture that you do have. All right, so our last guy is inventory. Like we said, it's the last filter that we look through, but it is very important to us because we need products to merchandise it. So the first thing here is looking at, where you need to expand and contract presentations. We always want to prioritize our best at. So, look at what you own in your inventory, but we do always want to go after the bras and bralettes and the leggings for airy and offline. Inventory is really where we're going to see a lot of flex and sell through. So, whether it's late products no longer arriving, unplanned carryover styles, these are all things that are going to be problems we have to solve, really. And we just have to look to what we own and sell what we own. And then here we're considering seasonal inventory levels. So just kind of for a minute, think about like the amount of products and what you have in your store in like February versus what you might have in November. It's very different, right? And our priorities for the different times of year are very different. In November, we're probably looking to max out everything we can and get as many units on the sales floor as possible in a brand right way. In February, that's not as important to us, right? Because we don't have quite as much traffic in our stores. It's not as, high volume time of year. So our priorities might be a little more different. We might be looking to more experiential things like trying new things with fixtures rather than just trying to like max out every surface we have. And then under inventory, one of our most valuable reports is the shipment and transit report. And this really lets us know like what's on the way to our store, whether it's loaded on a truck, whether it's sitting in the distribution center coming to us. It gives us a view into what I am going to see coming in shipment in the next week so that I know what kind of adjustments I need to make. So earlier we kind of said, okay, do I need to totally reset this presentation? Or can I just like lay out this one color of this shirt while I wait for the next color of shirt to come in shipment tomorrow? It's really understanding the workload you need to undertake, knowing when you're going to see that replan. So here's an example of the inventory filter in action, where a store was like, I set this back wall presentation and I set it to document. And guess what? I just have like a lot of bralettes. They're a best stack category for me. I want to max them out. So the store was really able to go in and in a really brand bright, neat, tidy way, they were able to max out some products that they did own. And that was a great selling category for them. So they didn't, again, just like fill this wall with socks or some random thing. It was like, I do great in bralettes. My guests love them. How can I get more of them into this wall and more focal? So they were still able to maintain the original integrity of the presentation and max out an item that they owned heavy in. And then another example of the inventory filter in action. So this is an offline store where they have extra wall bays. So some of you guys may have this in your store where maybe you don't set clearance, but you have some extra wall bays and you need to fill. So instead of just like, again, filling with some kind of random assortment, this store was able to pull a collection from a wardrober here that we see and pull a full collection into a wall. So they knew they owned a lot of this stuff. It was all like shoved on this one wardrober, wasn't giving a lot of spotlight to this item. They had these extra wall bays. So looking at their inventory filter, they said, okay, I can max this out. They paired it back with like some layering pieces and built it into a wall. So that's just another example of, you know, how you are using the inventory filter in a brand right way. Okay, so I think we made it here. Okay, so a little question for inventory filter. When I say remove from presentation product, that really means product that's moved to clearance for this new set. So when should you place remove from presentation product in presentations on the sales floor? So when is it appropriate to utilize clearance product in presentations? And when I say presentation, that means new floor set. So when would it be appropriate to pull those items in, do you think?
When you don't, maybe when you don't have something, you can use it if you have like a full run of it.
Yeah, I think the key
And
thing you said is
just,
having a, yeah, I love that. Like we have to own enough of it for it to look like presentation product. It doesn't need to be like PC and like really sold through, which by the time something moves to clearance, a lot of it is. But I do think that remove from presentation products can be really useful in bridging that time when especially we're waiting for late arrivals. If we know something's coming within the next week or two, can I substitute with, you know, this item for a little while as long as I have a good run of it, so I have full, you know, size assortment, a good amount. It's fitting into the storytelling of the new presentation, so it's not this like wild color story that I'm just trying to place here. It really fits within my storytelling. And I think in that situation, we would just, you know, sign it with a green sign, so not the clearance signage. We would keep it looking like the rest of the presentation until you receive whatever item you're missing. So awesome. Okay, so when we're looking at the thought process of utilizing the visual merchandising filters to make a decision kind of from start to finish, I'm starting with brand direction. So first I'm saying, has an adjustment been communicated? You can also think about like, did I see an adjustment for this in Sunday Solves? That's really kind of been signed off on by the brand. Or is there a standard adjustment to follow? So that's going to be more for a presentation like maybe a bra wall or an undie table where we say, when you sell through, this is always what you do. And there's a way to address that, which we'll look at those in a moment. Then I'm going to look to the guest filter and say, okay, which styles really make the most sense to double expose? If I need to fill in this presentation, what styles am I using? What is my guest loving? What's really resonating? What's doing well for me? Then I look into architecture. I'm looking at, you know, what do I own due to my assortment? How much space do I have? Do I need to think about fixture conversions, all those things? And then I'm looking at inventory to see like really what kind of adjustments needed. So you almost like start and end with inventory because you're looking and saying, okay, something's missing or I don't have something. And then you're ending and saying, okay, like if I am expanding, condensing, or substituting, what do I own to do that with? Okay. So that is all of our filters content before we get into a little bit of sell-through adjustments. And I think we have 30 more minutes together, right? So what I would love to do is just take a minute, see if anyone has any feedback or questions from the first section, and then we might take like a 3-minute break in between to just give you guys a minute to like get a drink or use the restroom. So any questions or comments about what we have gone over so far? Any great takeaways? Did you learn anything?
Well, for me, at 2804, I'm just been here 3 weeks, so this is really great to kind of see this in play. I haven't watched the modules, but I hear you talk through these processes and what the filters are going to be very helpful for me, so that my MTL and I can have the greatest partnership with that, and I can support her as well as what needs to be done in that. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. I think it gives you a great formula, right? I always say, like, if someone can explain a decision they made using the filters, I'm on board. There might have been a better or a best decision after that, but it's a good decision if you're rooting it in the visual merchandising filters. So awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm Sam from 2529 in Kennewick. I came from American Eagle. I transferred over here to Aerie, so I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of good stuff to know, because over there they do a little bit different than here.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Awesome. Good, good. Yes, there are definitely differences between the brands, but we all utilize the filters, but it just looks a little different through the lens of each brand. So awesome. Okay, so right now it's 4 minutes till. Can we be back right at the top of the hour? So wherever you are. For me, that's 11 o'clock, but for you guys, it's probably later. So we'll be back in 4 minutes, and we will continue with the rest. Give you a little break. All right, hopefully we're all back. I have at the top of the hour. So now that we're really grounded in our filters and we know what all of them are and we're feeling really good, now we're going to look at how we utilize the filters in addressing sell-through adjustments in our stores. So, you know, our area guests and offline guests, they love our product, and sometimes they buy it faster than we can get replan out, or maybe we're having some delivery issues or we can't get you product in time. So when you can't really maintain the brand directed visual presentations due to low inventory levels or missing programs, what do you do? So we're going to look at a few, different scenarios in stores and kind of how we utilize that filter thought process to make an adjustment. And then we're also going to look at some key presentations where we really have those, like, we follow this kind of adjustment all the time, like an evergreen adjustment kind of situation. So the first thing we want to talk about is, why do we adjust and when do we adjust? So what do you guys think? Like, first of all, why are we usually adjusting presentations? What are some reasons? And there are a few.
Because we sold through product already.
Yep, we haven't gotten the replan that we need in something, 100%. Why else?
It's just not selling as well as it should be.
Yeah, so like say an item was shown in the top 10 in the kickoff, but it's not moving for me, or like where I have it placed is not, like, I don't have to straighten it, I don't have to fill it, like what's going on. I need to probably make an adjustment. Yeah, I'm seeing a few things in the chat. Late arrivals is another great one. Like, I know it's coming, but it's just not here quite yet. Yep. All right, and then what do you think about when do we adjust? Like, when I think about, we could think about this in the way of in the floor set life cycle, when do I adjust? Or like time of week, day of the week? Like, what do you guys think are prime times for making adjustments?
Usually, probably like the Monday. You can look at the merch category report and see if it's selling.
Yeah, I think that's great. Analyzing your business on a Monday is always a great thing for a merch team leader to do. So really looking at all your reports, understanding your insights, and then making a plan for the week to maybe get all of your adjustments executed by Thursday for the weekend, because for most people, peak is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So maybe you're making the plan on Monday and executing before the weekend. Someone mentioned in the chat doing this before the store opens. I think this is really important, especially in high traffic, high volume situations. You want to try to do as much of this off hours as you can. So, good best practice is to come in with the shipment team and make adjustments as we're processing. Sometimes things have to happen during the day, right? Because you sell out literally in the middle of the afternoon. So there are times where we have to do things during the day, but those are probably going to be those smaller adjustments where we're like folding something differently or adding another color rather than like resetting a full presentation. When mapping, for sure, before and after the weekend, again, that peak business. I think too, it's like within the floor set life cycle, when you set a floor set and you let it live for a week and then really look at your reporting and understand what's going on, it's like let the floor set marinate and then say, okay, how can I like elevate this floor set? How can I make it even better? And really look at those categories that aren't moving for you or something that's not selling as great. So maybe like the week or two after a floor set, you're really digging into this to maintain the rest of the sustainment phase. Awesome. Okay, so here are some basic tips for addressing sell-throughs. So these are just things that you can think of every time, like maybe go through these three things before you try to do anything else. So first tip is to adjust folds to take up more space. So for example, changing a board fold to a fashion fold. So this is a great, like, in the middle of the afternoon fix where you just try not to have an empty table. How are you just adjusting how all of that same product is presented to fill the surface a little better? Another tip is to add more units of another color choice of the same program. So do you have another color in this t-shirt that you can add to this table, or another color in the leggings? or you could double expose another style from the same shop that works with the outfit. So is there something that's doing really well for me that I already have in a wall that now I could add to this table that makes sense within the outfit that's from the same shop to really support that presentation? So this is another example of a quicker fix. And then one that may need a little bit more time is to adjust fixturing so that less product is needed to fill the space. So this is where you're like swapping out T-bars for face outs. And I would say all of these tips are more for when you're really lacking inventory. So when you really don't have a lot to work with, this is kind of what you're going to. So here's some examples of all these things. So when we're talking about adjusting folds, here's kind of the cadence you would go to. So you might start with a really small fold to show like a ton of colors in something. And then as you start breaking in certain colors, you may need to change to a different fold. And then you may need to end with more of a layout, which is really, taking up a ton of space. And in bottoms, this is kind of like what it would look like. So again, just reiterating that adjusting folds is great in the moment, but it's not going to sustain your presentation for a long time, and it's really just spreading product around. So I think the more impactful thing to your business would be probably to add another item rather than just spreading out the same item, right? But again, in the moment, it's a great little solve. Okay, so the next example of this is, here is original direction on the left side, and we really wanted to keep this presentation really true to the key items, so we didn't really want to bring in any other items to muddy up this great sweatshirt presentation. So you kind of have to look really hard to tell even what they did because the fixtures look very similar, but they just took the colors they did have into a fashion fold, which is a wider fold than the original quarter fold. And they really chose to do this with some of the prints and patterns to really show those off. I think that's a great call as well, to really just fill the space on this fixture. I think the flower stand can feel really empty really quickly because it's so large. So really taking the time to make sure this feels full is very impactful. Okay, so now let's look at an example of adding more units of another color choice or double exposing another style. So here we see our original direction, and it looks like this store had like a lot more wall space than what was shown in the floor set document. So this may have been from their original mapping, but then it also looks like they sold through in the tanks, a lot. So what they were able to do is pull in another top that really helped to support the presentation. They also pulled in this great overall here to give some outfitting. So it all still works within the same shop. It actually kind of gives like a good layering situation, or like if you don't prefer a tank, we have a tee. So we're giving some great choices to the guests. So that is a great example. And then here is one of adjusting fixturing so that less product is needed to fill the space. So it looks like here in this original, I guess this was the direction in the floor set. So we have these overalls spaced out on either side, bralettes over tanks, and then in the middle we've got the menu of the tanks over some joggers with some cardigans on a side hang. So if the store started to break in the pants in the middle and the cardigans, it was getting a little light on that side hang. So what they were able to do was just add some drop-down tiers on the outside to place what was left of the cardigans behind the overalls. Gave a great little outfitting moment. Also didn't matter if we didn't have a ton of those cardigans. And then it chose to face out the colors that we owned a little more depth in the cargo joggers in the middle, and maybe hashed a broken color behind one of the others. So what do you guys think, like if we started to sell through in the tanks, like what would be a good little move there? So the tanks are what's on all the shelves on either side. Think about all of our little tips.
This is an easy one, but just making the folds bigger.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of colors there, and I think there's some detail that, like some buttons that maybe would be great on a half fold. So yeah, awesome. Any other ideas? I'm gonna like zoom in right here and see if you guys can see what's on this shelf.
Probably hang those pants so they can see them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could even think about the shelves as being like your understock almost. Like the tanks could come up to the top 2 rows. You could fold more of the pants, like if you have them. And then that might like show that little pocket detail really well. And that could almost feel like your understock, but the wall still feels full. Or you could look at like, I've got shorts folded there. So maybe I need to add some more colors of that short to fill in with the rest of these tanks as they start to break. So lots of different things you could do. I think the name of the game is just keeping really full and like I want to shop it, right? Keeping away from empty. Okay, so offline stores, we have an example for you. So exciting. So here is our original wall direction. I think we were starting to break in a lot of the bralettes, even the bottom. So there's a lot happening in this adjustment, but a few things that we can talk through. So we kept the build of the wall very similar. So this was probably happening, like I didn't have to rebuild the whole wall, reset the upper. So that's another thing you want to look at with making adjustments. Like how can I maintain the original hardware setup as much as I can so that I don't have to do a lot of building and rebuilding. So here, the store was just able to move down these like broken matching sets to drop down tiers instead of just the face out over face out. So we were getting pretty light. So when they moved those down to drop down tiers, they added in another top that really fit the space. They didn't have to adjust their spacing and kind of went with the outfit. Like it totally is a layering piece that could go with this. I would wear all this together. It doesn't feel like very weird or foreign. And that way they were able to maintain a full presentation and even add an additional item. So that's really what we're seeing here. We're still protecting a matching set, but we're condensing due to inventory, and then we're adding that other item from the same shop. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, now we've got like our quick tips in our back pocket. So how do we protect key presentations in the store? So one of the first presentations we're going to talk about is the center lead. I feel like we talk about the center lead a lot in both brands. It's the first guest interaction with product in our store. So we do want to make sure that this is very protected and that it is communicating the storytelling of the season and what the brand direction is at all times. So we really want to focus on maintaining the color story and the product category here. And really consider whether you're optimizing the productivity of this fixture. So that means like, am I making the most money off of this surface as I possibly can? And here's an example. So first, let's get grounded in what this center lead's all about. So this is from a few seasons ago. We were in the Pretty Country shop is what it was called. So focus on matching sets and intimates, like loungy kind of wear, but you can also wear it out. Strong, warm to cool, like very springy color story, a little bit of pastel, some more poppy colors. So that's where we're sitting on this center lead. So I'm going to try to zoom in on these photos because they're going to be a little small. So first example is of more so utilizing our quick tips, right? So this is a store really just adjusted folds. Again, this is a different design store, so it looks a little different. But they were just able to adjust folds, maintain the same items up front. They like had to restyle a form or two to really reflect what they did own because maybe they didn't have any more of the green pants. And they did go down to one wardrober because they just couldn't support both. So it looks like here we're struggling in apparel, right? So we were trying to make sure that this still felt full and impactful with the apparel that we did own. So notice that since they went down to one wardrober, they pushed their bust forms together on the left side to still create that balance within the presentation. So another example might be, okay, we're not breaking in the apparel because clearly we have all the stacks and we have both of our wardrobers, but maybe we started to break in the intimates. So you can't really see in this first example, but the undies that match this bra were shown on the back of the table initially. So here, since we were starting to break in some of the bralettes, maybe we didn't have full stacks in certain ones, we pulled the undies to the front because they were much fuller stacks, and then hung all of our bralettes on the side hang below so that we had this great matching set moment. And on the back of the table, we just folded down more pants to give more bottoms options because that's what we owned, right? So we kept them on the wardrobers, and then we filled the back of the table with them as well. Okay, so this is a really drastic example, but I love this example because it really shows how, you know, even when you have none of the products, we can make something work that's very similar. This is, I do want to preface this by saying, if you were in a situation where you literally had none of the product for your center lead, you would definitely want to partner with like your DTL or your field visual partner to make a very large adjustment like this. This example is from a new store opening where the store just did not receive any of the product that was going on the lead. So what the store decided to do was they were like, okay, I know I need this like fleece idea, this matching set idea, and I need to have some intimates here. So what they were able to do was pull a different fleece collection to the center lead that was a similar color story. It was just shorts instead of pants, but I did have some pants that I was able to add to a wardrobe up here. So same like kind of color story, different items, and then I did maintain bralettes across the bottom to still give that hit of intimate. I still have all the great styling on my forms. So still a very similar story, but done with a different product selection. So I think this is a great example of utilizing all your filters. Okay, so some other key presentations that we would want to protect at all times is going to be our undie tables. So one of the easiest things to do for undie tables is simply to eliminate a row, right? And just spread out your rows across if you're unable to support, you know, all of the rows. Another thing to think about here is a lot of times we have certain colors of undies that are only based in the drawers. So I would probably, you know, if I'm really selling through in some fashion choices on the top and I'm not able to be full and impactful, would I swap out a row for something that's drawer based, or maybe like a more basic run, or like maybe my lace, my all over lace that are just in the drawer, can I pull them to the tabletop? So consider your inventory really heavily here and make sure we're merchandising full stacks and rows on the undie table. Because if they're in the drawer, a lot of times your guest doesn't know that they're there. Okay, and then at other times, there may be more intense sell-through times. We haven't had this recently, but we did definitely have this over the past couple years, where undies were just really hard to come by. And this may be something we encounter in factory stores where we have been really struggling getting units in. So there are times where it can be appropriate to pull some lounge apparel in with our undies. So first example here is in a modern store. You'll notice we kept undies front and center. They all are grouped together. Any apparel we're adding is very separated, and it is an item that makes sense within an undie presentation. So like a basic tee, I would lounge around in that. And then I see this a lot recently in factory stores where we don't have quite enough undies to fill both tables. So those stores will condense to one table and make it really full and impactful, and utilize the other table for a key clearance item or a key apparel item until they're able to take the table back to undies. So I just want to reiterate that this is not a normal thing we would do. We want to maintain undie tables all the time, but there have been times where we've really had to flex due to inventory. So if you are in a factory store, just know that this is a suggestion for sure to make sure that undie tables feel really full and impactful. All right, so last, I think, key presentation we're going to talk through is a bra wall. So this is a standard adjustment for a bra wall. So essentially, bra walls are set up in 4 split sections, which is 1 bay in your store. The max amount of face outs we have is 4 across. So if we started to sell through in a couple colors of bras, and we'll say this is all one frame here that we're seeing, so one style of bra, then I would probably go to pulling the ones from the tray first. So you see I've got a few colors down there in the tray. So I pull those up to hanging to keep a really full presentation here. I do want to call out like maintaining the color story. So bra walls we'll look at in a minute more widely, but bra walls we really look at color story up and down versus across. So making sure that any like darker and blue and green choices we're keeping on the bottom here, and those like pinks and nudes we're keeping up top when I'm pulling up from the drawer, or sorry, from the tray. So if I continued, oh, and then here's a little hot tip. So something else you can do is hash bra styles. So maybe you're like halfway sold through in 2 colors. Can you do a similar color behind another one to still keep all of them out, but you don't have to, you know, send a whole face out on like 5 bras. Okay, so then I continue to sell down. I can eliminate a face out. So I could go from 4 face outs across down to 3. And that is the least amount you're going to want to have with it just being bras in the wall. If I continue to sell down, I may need to go to something like this, where I do go to 2 face outs across, but I need to add in some kind of apparel item to fill in here. So we wouldn't just want to spread 2 across that 4-foot section. We would need to sub in with something else. Okay. All right, and then just for offline stores, I guess this is another key presentation, is just talking about the black legging shop. So for Aerie stores, this is on a table, so same kind of information for you. But this is such a key presentation for us, whether it's table or wall. This is doing a ton of volume for our stores. It's a great basics shop. And we do want to make sure that we maintain the integrity of this at all times. So we do just want to focus on keeping collections separated. We could, like if I was severely sold down in Real Me, we see that this whole middle section is all Real Me, and that's what both of my signs say on either side. So if I needed to swap out and pull a different collection on the left side, that would be totally fine, but I need to like change my marketing. I need to make sure everything on that side of the wall is truly that new collection, so that it's really easy for the guests to navigate, even if you're having to adjust. So really keeping those collections separated is very important here. And I am maybe going to come back to this. I guess we'll watch this. So while we've got 8 minutes left, so I think we'll be okay. So this is just a great little video showing how to maximize the black legging table and make sure to maintain guest navigation of this fixture. So this is on a table in an Aerie store, but you can apply this to the presentation we just saw for offline too. But we're just going to watch the store team really take this presentation and level it up. I think something that we think about with the black legging destination is making it really all about leggings. So it's almost like the black legging table or the black legging presentation is similar to a bra wall or an undie table, in that we're really standing for this one item. It's not really all about the outfitting. It's not about like building this like outfit for the guest. It's more about this key item. And I think here we're seeing this muddied up a little with like the bralettes being so focal in the front. And we're just not getting that key item idea. So we're going to watch them take this, and actually, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing and reshare so I can make sure you can hear the music. Okay, we're back. All right, so let's watch this guy. And I had a dream that someday I would just fly away. And I always knew I couldn't stay. So I had a dream that I just fly away. I've been on my own for a minute. Is it only me out there? Searching for the place to begin it. Okay, so here we really saw the team take all the filters into consideration. They protected the brand direction by making sure to maintain like the large marketing on the tabletop, the overall integrity of the presentation, but they did really take their guests into consideration, I think, in making sure that the promos were really clear, because it looked like some things were on different promos. They wanted to make sure to set this up in a way that communicated that really effectively. And then they really did take their inventory into consideration and saying, okay, I don't own a lot of what's supposed to go on the tabletop here, so this presentation's not feeling very full. So how can I sub out and use what I do own in black leggings and change my marketing out so that it all makes sense, but really like protect the fullness and make this presentation really impactful. So I think the black legging table is a huge presentation for us to really inspect almost like daily, but make sure that we're flexing this how we need to utilize the inventory that we have in the best way. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna look at is another little example of an adjustment in action. This is kind of taking all the things together, hopefully. So first of all, here we're looking at really the table on the right, where we're starting to sell through in these flares that are on the tabletop. And just for reference, we're showing the rest of the shop here. So we have this full wall with like some cute little matching sets, some fleece joggers in here with some skirts and tops. And then on the trapeze base on either side, we have this Real Me Extra legging collection, again, with some layering pieces and dresses. So we're just really starting to break in these flares. So let's take a peek at what this store was able to do. So they were like, wow, all this stuff on the trapeze base would be great on a table. So this was like a larger adjustment, right? They really took from here. They did protect like the basic Real Me leggings that were on there, the shirts that were being used, and they really just subbed out the legging collection, the fashion collection that was on top. So we subbed out to these printed Real Me Extra leggings with their matching sports bras. So they utilized something from a not as focal presentation that was a great collection to highlight on this table, which was very much more focal. And then maybe they were able to put some of that more PC stuff into the side hangs onto those trapeze bays. So I think this is a great example of, you know, utilizing what you have, maintaining a lot of the original setup, but really making it work for your inventory. Oh, and that's where we went from A to B. Okie dokie. So just to wrap it up today, understanding that sell-through adjustments are basically almost all done during the sustainment phase of the floor set life cycle. So sustainment is the longest phase of the floor set life cycle. I'll do another plug for AEO Academy. If you have not gone through that training in the floor set life cycle, definitely do it, because that's how we talk a lot in merchandising trainings and in merchandising in general, is like what phase of the floor set life cycle. We're always in some phase. So sell-through adjustments generally happen in the sustainment phase, which is the time between floor sets essentially. So we utilize those to keep the floor set alive from that middle part. So looking at, you know, otherwise how we utilize the filters in the different parts of the floor set life cycle. For the talent portion, we just want to make sure all leaders have a firm grasp on the merchandising filters, even if it's a selling team leader, if it's a sales lead. I mean, everybody should know what the filters are, so that if they're the only leader on a Saturday afternoon and a table's suddenly empty, are they able to make a decision in the moment to best protect the business? In the planning and communication phase, you're really looking to utilize the Mapped app to really plan for those late arrivals or for adjustments you may have to make with the floor set. Under execution, that's when you're using all your tools to really like nail a floor set. And then we are definitely assessing the floor set after you set one. But assessment doesn't just stop with the visual merchandising assessment. It's really looking at reporting, like how is this floor set performing for me? What changes do I need to make? And then, of course, sustainment, we said, this is where the filters really shine, because this is where you are doing most of your adjusting. Okay, so since this is the first training, I'm wrapping us up. I promise we'll be done in 1 minute. So this is the merchandising training roadmap. I just want to direct you guys to this as you're, you know, kind of in the midst of your onboarding and training. Just know that this does exist. It's in the Zipline library. I think it's under worksheets in the visual library. And this really just takes you through, you know, all the different tools you have, things you can do to develop yourself within your role. And I love that it really breaks it down into, you know, AEO Academy, like formalized training, learning labs like this versus on-the-job experience. So this is a great resource for you to make sure that you are getting everything you can to train yourself. All right. And then just want to take a few minutes while we're still all together. Anybody want to share any takeaways from today? Any questions you have? Anything else before we let everyone go?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
In regards to just the last photo, I don't know if I missed it. When we're setting, when we're doing those sell-through strategies, you had those drawer bases under that table. Is it like what is above is below? So like if you were to pull out that drawer, it's going to be what is sitting on top of that drawer base, or is it any product that makes sense in those drawers that you may have carryover from that you should have on the floor?
So I think that's a great question. So for understock, if you're making an adjustment, you definitely want to change out your understock to reflect the adjustment that you've made. So you would want to pull any extra products you have that you've placed in the presentation and place underneath. Now, if you had a situation where like maybe I don't have any more of that, then I would utilize those drawers for other things within the same shop. So maybe like the example we just looked at, I'm housing other leggings in those drawers because I maybe don't have any more of what's on the tabletop to understock. So hopefully that answers your question. And I think along the same lines, like consider, we didn't really talk about this, but if you are making a larger adjustment like what we just saw and there's a bus form nearby, we definitely want to change out our bus form to reflect the new products we're bringing in, to highlight that item or to just kind of change the whole story. So great question. Anybody else? All right. Well, I know we're a few minutes over, so thank you all for joining and participating, and hopefully we all learned something. And I think you have business acumen later today with Lakeisha, so hopefully the filters will then link a little bit more directly to reporting, and you guys will feel really ready to take on your business. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and have a great rest of your day.